football. They may live in Tennessee and be Tennessee fans or Vanderbilt fans. They may live in, as a matter of fact, when I was in Tennessee in 05, 06, and 07, I lived in Memphis. And so you figured Memphis would be a Tennessee stronghold, right? No. They hate Tennessee and Memphis. They like Mississippi, Mississippi State, Arkansas, right, before anybody else. But really the SEC, if you live anywhere in the SEC, it's not about your team. It's about the entire SEC. The entire SEC. It's Georgia. It's Auburn. It's Mississippi State. So if you fly the flag of the SEC, that's all good. So to me, it's not a fair fight in terms of where your loyalties are. Our loyalties are with Ohio State first, and then with the Big Ten second, maybe, unless unless we're just stuck with Ohio State. We're stuck on Ohio State. That's fine, but it's not the Big Ten all-encompassing because we're more intelligent fans than that. We're not as tunnel vision as they are in the SEC. So that's the reason why Ohio State's perceived weaknesses aren't really there.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that bias against Ohio State too, but you sum it up nicely, my man. See, that's great. I wasn't even planning on talking Buckeyes. That's awesome, man. So let's segue that right into the pro game. I mean, with them, we'll finish with the Browns, but with the NFL kicking off tonight and a great kickoff game to spotlight the beginning of the NFL season there. Just looking around the AFC, what do you look at as the real power teams this season?
The AFC is a lot less complicated. I mean, I look at the AFC. I really like Cincinnati. I really like New England. I like the Jets. I like Denver and Kansas City. Now, from that scrum will probably emerge the Patriots and the Broncos at the end. So I think the winner between those two teams in the playoffs will be the Super Bowl representative from the AFC, unless Cincinnati gets better play from Andy Dalton and their tremendous roster of talent comes to the fore. Don't sleep on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has some good young players. They've changed over their defense. As a matter of fact, we did an interview with the play-by-play announcer of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Bill Hillgrove, and we addressed the youth on the defense. It's not just youth, but it's youth that can play. It's not just Ben Roethlisberger being Ben Roethlisberger. It's Ben Roethlisberger becoming comfortable in Todd Haley's offense. It's Mike Tomlin, one of the best coaches in the history of the National Football League. It's a lot of stuff. So don't sleep on Pittsburgh. Don't sleep on the Jets, because the Jets look like they have their thing together behind Geno Smith. And, of course, if Geno slips, you got Michael Vick, who I think is in a perfect role with a good team that he can fill in stopgap for a few weeks until Geno Smith gets healthy, if he gets hurt. There are the Miami Dolphins. They finally gotten their quarterback situation straightened out, I believe. Ryan Tannehill needs to take the next step up to become a great player and drag the Dolphins along with him with their young, talented cast. In the West, there is the Kansas City Chiefs. It's an Andy Reid team. You know they're going to be competitive. You know they're going to be good. They're the Denver Broncos, who have all the talent in the world at every position. It would seem that it's going to be a fait accompli, but we know it's not, because the team that always has all of the strength stereotypically never wins the thing. So we've got some things to sort out in the AFC, but I think it comes down to New England and Denver. Over on the other side, in the NFC is a dogfight. Really, there are, let me count them. There's Green Bay, there's Chicago, there's Detroit, there's Minnesota, there's Philadelphia, there is the whole of the NFC South, and then there's a whole of the NFC West. All of those teams could win the Super Bowl. Are you serious? So there's no way I could really predict other than to say I think the Seattle Seahawks have a great chance of repeating, but then so do the San Francisco 49ers and a new stadium and all the emotion that brings, with some problems in terms of personnel, in terms of suspensions, injuries, and the like. There are some factors bubbling under the surface for Colin Kaepernick. Then there are the St. Louis Rams, who have one of the best rosters and lineups in the NFL, save a quarterback. But if the quarterback can play decently, they'll be in the mix. You got Carolina. You got so many teams that can really win. You can't say there are any bad teams. But I'm going to tell you, I think I'm going to pick a dark horse in the NFC, and that dark horse are the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears, for the last 3 or 4 seasons, were going along great. At about the midway point of the season, they had a spate of injuries to Cutler, to Matt Forte, to Lance Briggs, to Brian Urlacher, to Brandon Marshall, to their offensive line. I mean, all over the field. You just don't understand it. Every year it happens to them. And this year is not going to be any exception. They are exceptionally talented. They get great play out of their defensive backs. Their defensive backs are opportunistic. And that defense under my friend Mel Tucker, a Clevelander, is going to get better with the better personnel, younger personnel, faster and stronger personnel, and Mel's aggressive approach to defense. If they can stay healthy, they're my dark horse to win the NFC Championship. Let's look at it like that. And probably Atlanta is going to rebound also. They seemingly don't have a lot of name brands on their team, but they do have a great quarterback in Matty Ice, Matt Ryan. If they stay healthy, they're going to be a rebounding team from last year, which looked to be an apparition. Same thing is true of the Houston Texans in the AFC. We know the Houston Texans aren't a 2-win team. We know that. So if they can regain some health and some good quarterback play vis-a-vis Ryan Mallett, then I think the Texans are going to be forced to reckon with also. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Chicago and Seattle in the NFC, and let's see if that will be the case at the season's end.
Interesting you said that about Atlanta, because I'm looking for a bounce back with them and Matt Ryan too, man. I'm definitely interested to see what they do. So, just for entertainment purposes, I've been doing this with all of my football guys all week. Just give me some predictions coming out of these divisions. Who do you think comes out of the East? You think Philadelphia is able to hold the other teams off?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's Philadelphia. And keep in mind, I don't really do predictions, but I'll say because they play the best defense out of Washington, Dallas, and I think they'll come out on top.
How about New Orleans, man? We were talking yesterday, man, and, I'm telling you, I think that's the one team. John McMullen from the Sports Network, he was saying, he thinks Seattle and New Orleans, whichever team gets the home field, can make it all the way through there, and he's looking at perhaps New Orleans. I'm like, man, I'll tell you, I've always liked Drew Brees, and same thing, they're a different animal when they play at home than they are when they play on the road. I think they're somebody to really watch out for over there in the NFC.
I think so. I think New Orleans and Seattle are going to battle it out. And the interesting thing is, it was the same way last year, whereas New Orleans was in the lead, and then some injuries kind of knocked them off, and playing on the road kind of knocked them off, and they found themselves behind Seattle. And Seattle gained momentum as the season ended with that suffocating defense and good offensive play led by Russell Wilson. And I think a lot of people think that Russell Wilson is a caretaker. Just flashback to North Carolina State. When he left North Carolina State and went to Wisconsin, he was a different type of quarterback. And he was a quarterback that can go get it. He was a quarterback that can make it rain. And I still see Russell Wilson as that player. And just you have to be careful because Russell Wilson has taken the next step where he can pass as easily as to fake you out and throw those little dump-offs and dink and dunks. Then you're going to have some problems with the Seattle Seahawks with their running game. So I agree that New Orleans is going to be a real good team, and I just think it depends on where they play and when they play on the road.
You're listening to the Sports Fix. Kendall Lewis and J-Rock here talking a little bit about the NFL, looking around things. So, and I'm with you, too, on predictions. It's so hard because, like, anytime you talk about any of these teams, you can say, well, if they stay healthy, if this happens. So it's such a crapshoot how it actually plays out at the end of the season. The only thing I will ask you, though, is if you had to pick two teams to play in the Super Bowl now, who do you think are the favorites in your eyes to meet at the end of the season?
Well, because the season is so long, I mean, the team that is less subject to attrition, you really don't know that. And I really couldn't hazard a guess. It will be real hard. It will be impossible for me to guess. And that's just what you'd be asking me to do is guess.
Oh, yeah.
And I have no clue. I have no clue. I just know that there's a pool of teams which are capable of winning a championship. And since Seattle won last, I just say Seattle without having to go through all the permutations of it and things that you can possibly anticipate. I'd have to say Seattle. Isn't that what the experts, quote unquote, do? They take the last year's champion and always insert them as the favorite. So I'll do
and
that.
How often does that never happen? You know what I mean? Like, most definitely.
Every year, it never happens. It never happens where they, where it ends up who they pick. So I'll do that too. I'll follow suit. I'll say Seattle.
There you go. I'll tell you what, though. You talk about that pool of teams. Tonight's game, I think I mentioned this a little bit yesterday. People sleep on the Green Bay Packers. I think, again, here's that if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and stays on his feet, man, I think that tonight you're looking at a matchup of two of the best teams starting the season off there. Look out for Green Bay for sure. You talk about on the road. I saw an interesting stat that, when you're talking about home field and that down for the playoffs, Aaron Rodgers in the last 6 seasons, he's got the second highest quarterback rating and second most touchdowns of all quarterbacks when playing on the road. So, he's such a difference maker for Green Bay there, as we've seen with them before. So, but yeah, there's definitely a pool of teams, and it's definitely different in the NFC than it is in the AFC. In the AFC, there's a lot more separation, I think, between the top couple of teams and then the middle pack that's trying to catch up with them. And then there's the Cleveland Browns. Let's end things focusing right there where we usually start things with the Browns and looking ahead to this season. And I know a lot of it is going to come a lot more clearly in the next 2 or 3 weeks as we see the first couple of games against different offenses and different looks and all of that. So, that being said, what are you looking towards here with the Browns heading into Pittsburgh here and starting another season?
Well, the way I did it is the way I always do it. And I get out the schedule, and I look at the schedule, and I think of where they're playing and who they're playing, what the emotions are, what the likelihood of having a whole team are. And I sat down and I looked at the schedule, and this is what I do. At Pittsburgh, L. New Orleans at home, L. Baltimore Ravens at home, L. And the reason quarterback by Drew Brees, quarterback Joe Flacco. All three quarterbacks have won, all three quarterbacks have won Super Bowls recently. All three teams are playing excellent defense right now. And even though the Browns have a pretty good defense themselves, I don't see the offensive capabilities to keep those other teams busy. I can't see them getting in a shootout with Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Baltimore and having the weapons to compete in that shootout. That's 0-3. Bye week, enter Johnny Manziel. Tennessee